Hey everybody, welcome to the video. So we're breaking down the Dixie Vodka 400 at Homestead-Miami Speedway on Sunday, February 28th at around 3:30 p.m. Eastern. What's going to be our first normal race of the NASCAR season. Yes, I know we are already on race number 3, but the first couple of races, we were at the Daytona 500 on the oval. That's always a bit chaotic. And then we went to the road course, which was probably even crazier than the oval. So now that we're back at a 1.5 mile track, I know people don't get too excited about these. They're boring. Yes, I get that. Although Homestead's one of the better 1.5 mile tracks, but we have a lot more data points to look at. And these are a bit easier to predict from a fantasy perspective, and that's why we're here. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure you guys are as well. But if you find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like. The more you guys interact with the content, leaving likes, leaving comments, and all that fun stuff, it's really going to help this video get out to more eyeballs in the YouTube world, which obviously helps me out. And my NASCAR community on here does a great job of leaving likes. You guys always give me the most likes I ever have on videos, so I really do appreciate that. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I really do appreciate it. And while you're at it, you might as well hit that notification bell as well, so you don't miss out whenever I post new content. And YouTube tells me around 50% of the people who watch these videos have not yet subscribed. So if you're a frequent visitor of the channel, or if you're just new and you like what you see, consider the subscribe button because it really helps the channel grow. It's obviously going to help me out as well. And if you want to help support the channel over on Patreon, link is down below for that. It's only $10 a month. I'll throw something on the screen so you know exactly what you get each and every single race day. But there's a ton of good information on there. The main sheet, projections, power rankings, GP driver exposures. I play in the big tournament every single week, so I really can't be more transparent than that. I write a breakdown article each and every single week. You can hop into the Discord chat. There's always people in there talking NASCAR any time of the day. 5 a.m., 4 a.m., 1 a.m. I'm usually up late. I'm up early. So if you ever want to talk NASCAR or ask questions, I am always available in my Discord. It's the easiest way to contact me. We have the green flag speed cheat sheet, previous optimal lineups, 2020 optimal lineups, 2021 optimal lineups, the past Homestead-Miami Speedway slate analysis. There's a ton of stuff on there. Aero packet schedule, whatever you want. It's probably on my spreadsheet. So if you want access to it, link is down below for that. Like I said, only $10 a month. And one more plug before we get out of here. I do want to mention that I did team up with Sal to get a Monkey Knife Fight code for you guys if you want to try it out. You get a free money bonus up to $50 using code RACE50. I'll try to link something in the description below, but if you don't know anything about Monkey Knife Fight, it's kind of like a prop site where you can bet on fantasy points for the drivers. So if you want to use any of my information, my projections, whatever, and use it on that site, you might as well try it out, because if you sign up, you get a $50 match bonus using code RACE50 at monkeyknifefight.com. I'll try to put something in the link down below, but again, that is code RACE50, and I think that's it for the plug, so without further ado, let's get into today's video. And as per tradition, I did forget to mention a couple things before we got into the preview, so I just want to mention when I'm going live and some DraftKings contest details. So on my own channel at 11 a.m. Eastern on Sunday, I usually did that at 10 or 10:30, but I gotta be honest, I'm pretty tired on Sunday morning, so I don't want to get up that early, so I'm going to push it back to 11 a.m. Eastern, plus the race starts a little bit later anyway, so I think that'll be fine, so that'll be on my own channel. Then the Awesemo Live Before Lock, this is not completely confirmed, but I think it's going to be at 2:30 p.m. Eastern. If you guys want to follow me on over there after my own live stream, we'll probably have like an hour or two break, so you can have some lunch, make some lineups and things like that. But you guys can find me on the Awesemo Live Before Lock NASCAR show with Jason and myself at around 2:30 p.m. Eastern. And if you went into the DraftKings contest once again, all you have to do is comment your DK username below, saying something nice with it, whatever you want to do. But I will invite the first 100, well, like I said in my last video, first 98 people, because I'm definitely going to be in there, so that's 99, and then my girlfriend's going to be in there as well, so that's 98. So the first 98 people that contact me can get into the DK contest. I know some of you have been saying I could just make a reoccurring contest, but if I did that, it'd be the same people each and every single week, and I know there's more than 100 people that want in, so it's really just a first come, first served basis, and if you miss it one week, you have a chance of getting back the next week. But if you're early on the video, your chances got better because I go in chronological order. But yeah, comment your DK username below if you want in the contest. I do want to shout out the winners last week. I'll throw something on the screen. But first place, we had ZWool83 with a score of 313.9. Then second place, I know he's in my Discord, but I don't know how to say his name. I think it's Jagabo, something like that. 3, he got second place. And then Drugman88, you got third. Then just outside of the top 3 on the podium was Union 513 and Last Cowboy. So congrats to the winners there. You got around $100-some. It's a nice fun contest just to interact with you guys each and every single week, and I look forward to doing it. Just a couple of bucks to enter. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the before preview stuff. So I think we can get to the preview of this race. So like I mentioned many times, this is the Dixie Vodka 400 at Homestead-Miami Speedway. There's your outline of the track. Pretty symmetrical. That's the right word for it. Yeah, symmetrical. This is a steep, high tire wear, intermediate 1.5 mile track. There's a lot of tire wear here, so if you're looking for similar tracks, like you can throw in all the 1.5 tracks, that's fine. But if you really don't want to get into it, it's like Auto Club, Atlanta, Darlington, which I know is not a 1.5 mile track, neither is Auto Club, but you know, the way they're kind of shaped kind of works out. And plus, Darlington's pretty steep, as is Homestead, so it all works out there. So those are your real high tire wear tracks, which are going to be very comparable. This is a high tire wear track. We have 267 laps, which means we have close to 200 Dominator points available, which means Dominator points are going to finally be important this week. I know the first two races of the season, we had the road course, which only had 70 laps and less than 50 Dominator points, so really, who cares about Dominator points too much? Then at the Daytona 500, we don't care about Dominator points whatsoever when it comes to plate racing, so we haven't really tried to lock in Dominators, maybe besides Chase Elliott last week. So we're finally at our first Dominator race where we're going to have to try to find Dominators in our laps, because if you don't have the main Dominator, you're not going to win a tournament. Now, maybe you can get really lucky in cash if you have all the right place differential guys, but if you want to try to take down contests, you're going to want the right Dominators this week. And now, usually, we're going to be looking at anywhere from like 1 to 3 or 2 to 3 Dominators in our lineups at these 1.5 mile tracks that have close to 300 laps. But with all the amazing place differential plays, you might be able to get away with just one in some contests, especially if you go with Hamlin on the pole and think he leads the majority of the race, then use a bunch of place differential plays with him. That could work this week, but you're definitely going to want to target multiple Dominators in your lap, especially in tournaments, because if you get the two main Dominators, very good chance you're going to at least do very well. I'm not saying you're going to take it down, but if you have all the right pieces, you can take it down, but that's going to kind of be the strategy heading into this race. So looking at Dominators this week more so than we have all season long so far. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So without further ado, let's get into the driver by driver breakdown portion of this video, which is why I know everyone is here. So just some of my first thoughts on the overall pricing of this slate. I don't think it's terrible, but I still think they're overvaluing place differential a little bit, because this is not the Daytona 500. Place differential is not the absolute most important thing every single race. Dominator points are very, very important. Those are the guys that are going to take down tournaments. Like, yes, a guy like MDB is a very, very strong play, but he's only a couple $100 cheaper than Logano, and if Logano happened to lead 100 laps, he could score over 100 points. So, you know, a guy like MDB is not going to win a race. He's kind of capped at that 50, 60 point range, you know, where he finishes, because he's not going to dominate and win. So that's just kind of my thoughts there. I still think they're overvaluing place differential a little bit, but I think overall it's fine. But up top, we have Kyle Busch at $11,800, the most expensive driver on the slate. He is starting all the way back in 24th. Got to be honest, I'm not sure I'm going to have too much Kyle Busch. I think he's a really strong play projection-wise, but if he doesn't get up front and lead laps, he's not going to be a better play than any of these other guys that happen to, you know, get up front and lead laps. Because if a guy like, let's say, Denny Hamlin leads the majority of this race, I know he's starting first, so he's no place differential upside, but he could easily outscore Kyle Busch even if he happens to get a top 5 finish. I think Kyle Busch is a safe play, but you got to be careful with that price tag, because it's definitely going to handicap the rest of your lineup. But Homestead is that this was normally the championship race in years past. So the drivers that were first through fourth in the standings competing for the championship in the final four, they typically ran near the front. So that's going to throw a wrench into things, because other drivers aren't going to try to overtake them and ruin their race. I mean, no one's going to want to ruin a championship car just to get like a top 5 finish. So that's something to keep in mind there. Also, last year for this race, it was supposed to be during the day. Then we had like a rain or lightning delay. I forget exactly what happened, but it got pushed to the night. So the cars were set up for the day, ended up being a night race, so that threw a wrench into things as well. So I'm not going to go too heavy on just the specific track history here at Homestead. I think looking back at last year at the track type form, which I think includes a 13 race sample size. Yeah, 13 total races. I have Darlington, Auto Club, and all the other 1.5 mile tracks. They're listed in there. Then the specific 2020 season 1.5 mile tracks in there as well, which I think is a 10 race sample size if I remember correctly. So I'm going to rely more heavily on those than I would the specific track history at Homestead, but just something to keep in mind for you guys when we're looking at the data. But anyway, Kyle Busch, fantastic at Homestead. That's why I'm saying he's not a fade at that price tag, but it's going to be harder for him to get up front and lead laps because he is starting that far back, and no competition caution is going to hurt things a little bit as well. But I'm expecting a really strong running from Kyle Busch. I know last year that people did not like rostering him because he could not get up front and lead laps. He did win that Texas race and dominated that one, but for the most part, Kyle Busch was not a big lap leader. We know the lack of practice definitely hurt him, and we do not have practice this week once again. The only practice we are getting is for new tracks this year, so we're not going to have any practice data for Homestead, unfortunately. But looking at the track type form last year, he was not bad. He was just not leading laps. Like, the numbers are actually pretty solid. An average finish inside the top 10, solid running position, solid driver rating. Did have a win. That was at Texas late in the season. But looking at the top 5s, he's only behind Kevin Harvick and Denny Hamlin last year at top 5s of these tracks, which those were the two best drivers last year. So Kyle Busch was having a good season finish-wise, but if we're looking at the Dominator points, which is obviously going to be pretty important at his price point, he wasn't getting those. Only 13.2 laps led per race and 13.8 fast laps. If you compare that to guys like Truex, Chase Elliott, Blaney, Kevin Harvick, even Denny Hamlin, Brett Keselowski, it just doesn't add up that well. That's the problem with Kyle Busch. He was just not getting up front last year. The number at the 1.5 mile tracks were also very good. Like I mentioned, only behind a couple drivers in top fives. Was actually above Kevin Harvick here in the top five department at 1.5s, but it actually tied with Ryan Blaney and Denny Hamlin for the most top fives at these track types. And look, the problem is the price point. I think we all know Kyle Busch, if he was a little bit cheaper, would be an absolute smash play. The problem is he's really going to handicap your lineup at nearly $12,000, because if you were playing Kyle Busch, you're going to want another Dominator because he's not going to lead the laps early on. You want to roster a guy that can lead laps early on. So we're probably looking at a guy like either Kevin Harvick, Denny Hamlin, Joey Logano. You throw those two guys in together, we want to get some place differential guys like MDB, Tyler Reddick, and if we do that, we are going to be dumpster diving. And the thing about this slate is that the guys that are cheap this week are absolutely awful. Like, we have no good place differential cheap guys. The best one I think is going to be like an Alfredo or Corey LaJoie. And if you want to get dirty, Quinn Houff. But man, it's going to be pretty gross down low. So I'm not sure if going super top heavy with Kyle Busch is going to be the best strategy this week. So that's just something to keep in mind. I think he's a good prediction play. The problem is fitting him in your lineup at that price point. So I'm not sure I'm going to go there in cash games, but in tournaments, I don't hate having some Kyle Busch exposure. Then dropping down Martin Truex Jr. here, he comes in at $11,400, and I feel like he might be a bit overpriced considering he's not starting that far back. He's starting in 9th, and he's only $400 cheaper than Kyle Busch, starting many, many spots further back. So I feel like DraftKings like Truex a little bit too much here, but anytime, NASCAR heads to a 1.5 mile track, we should definitely have interest in Truex. That's his bread and butter. He always performs very well at these track types. He has a good history here at Homestead, but like I said, not going to focus too much on the history at Homestead unless I feel like it's very relevant. But looking at the numbers last year at these types of tracks, Truex was one of the best drivers at these track types. He was actually first in average green flag speed at the Atlanta race last year, which I think is a pretty similar track to Homestead. And he was third fastest in average green flag speed, like total, at the high tire wear tracks, adding those all together, only behind Denny Hamlin and Chase Elliott. So I think Truex should definitely have a very strong car. He had one of the best average running positions last season at these kind of tracks. Had no wins, but 4 top 5, some of the most laps led, and actually the most fast laps. So definitely think Truex is going to be a solid option here. He's just going to be one of those guys you're going to want to mix and match up top for Dominator points. Not like I absolutely love him, but I would definitely not want to fade Martin Truex because at 1.5 mile track, he is almost certainly always on my radar. And then everyone's fan favorite here, Chase Elliott at $11,000, starting 11th. I feel like he is a very, very similar play to Martin Truex, where I feel like he's a bit pricey, but he's going to be one of the top candidates to dominate win this race. Last year, he had the best average green flag speed at the high tire wear tracks. And overall, very, very strong season at the high tire wear tracks in general. And he actually almost won Homestead last year. He had one of the best cars in the field, probably the second best, right behind Denny Hamlin. But he had a decent chance of winning that race. If you guys don't remember, he ran into Joey Logano at the end of the race. Not like the very end, but closing in stage 3 at some point. I forget exactly what lap it was, but Logano was giving him a bit of a payback from the Bristol wreck, where Logano was a lap down and ended up racing Chase Elliott pretty hard there. Didn't let him pass, even though he was a lap down. So ended up slowing down Chase Elliott and let Denny Hamlin pass him pretty easily. So kind of got screwed there, but I mean, I definitely have a lot of high hopes here for Chase. I forget if I mentioned this a minute ago, but he did have the best average green flag speed at the high tire wear tracks last year, and he was one of the best drivers at the 1.5s. Looking at the numbers, if to go specifically at 1.5s, he had an average running position of 7.9, which is the second best, only behind Ryan Blaney. One of the best driver ratings, had a win, 3 top 5s. I believe the second most fast laps and a decent amount of laps led as well. So Chase Elliott starting 11th. You get a little bit of place differential upside, and he should contend for a top 5, if not win this race. So definitely have quite a bit of interest in Chase Elliott. And then the man of the hour, Kyle Larson. I feel like he's going to be heavily talked about this week, but it's deservedly so because Kyle Larson loves racing at Homestead. If you guys don't know anything about Homestead, the fastest way around the track is up near the wall. And what does Kyle Larson like to do? He likes to ride near the wall. It's the fastest way around the track, and Kyle Larson is very good at it. And I definitely have some interest in Kyle Larson here. He's one of the best drivers at Homestead. I know he didn't race here last year, but it's going to be hard not to want to play him because he's starting back in 17, so you got a little bit of place differential upside. Now, he'd be best paired with a guy like a Joey Logano or a Denny Hamlin or a Kevin Harvick because they could dominate the early portion of this race. But looking at his numbers at Homestead specifically, because makes no sense to look at the 2020 numbers at 1.5s because we have a one race sample size for Kyle Larson because he got hit with that suspension during COVID on Twitch. So looking at his numbers specifically at Homestead, 73.9 DraftKings points per race. That is more than anybody besides Tyler Reddick, who only has a one race sample size. Average finish of 12.6, but the average running position of 6.7 is much better. The second best drive rating, only behind Kyle Busch. No wins, but 3 top 5s, the most laps led and the most fast laps. So yeah, I got plenty of interest in Kyle Larson here. You get some place differential upside, and you get one of, if not the best driver at Homestead-Miami Speedway. So definitely have a lot of interest in Kyle Larson here. I think he's a very strong play. Not sure if I'm going to get there in cash games because of the price point, and I want to get some of these place differential guys in with probably a Denny Hamlin. So probably better tournament play than a cash play, but I definitely like Kyle Larson this week. And then dropping out of Ryan Blaney at $10,400. He is starting 14th. And I got to be honest, as president of the Ryan Blaney fan club, it has not been a strong start for us Ryan Blaney owners. Now, he did not kill you last week. He did end up having a halfway decent score compared to guys like Chase Elliott and Martin Truex Jr. So it wasn't the end of the world, but it's definitely not what we were expecting. He had a pretty crappy run the entire race. Then obviously he wrecked out early on at Daytona, which, not his fault, but definitely didn't have the greatest race last week. But man, at the 1.5s last year, Ryan Blaney was the guy you wanted in your lineups. He was an absolute rock star. Now I know if we're looking at his Homestead numbers, they weren't that impressive, but last year Ryan Blaney had one of the best cars in the field. He led, I think, around 70 laps in that last race, and he was a top 4 car right there with Denny Hamlin, Chase Elliott, Tyler Reddick, and Ryan Blaney. I mean, Blaney was awesome, so I definitely think Blaney can have a pretty strong race here. Now, if we're looking at his average green flag speed numbers last year, he was by far the fastest at the 1.5s. Wasn't even close. Now, that was mostly at the low tire wear tracks. At the high tire wear tracks, he did have some bad luck mixed in there. If we're looking at Auto Club, where he had a really good race. He was one of the best cars in the field, him and Alex Bowman. And then something happened with his tire. I forget, he had a pit near the end of the race, kind of killed his day there. But Blaney, man, he was decently fast at the high tire wear tracks, besides Darlington, which is not a really good track for him. But at Auto Club and Homestead, the guy was fantastic. Also had a really strong car at Atlanta, too. So I see no reason not to like Ryan Blaney here. I feel like he might go a bit overlooked because he hasn't been amazing to start the year. And plus, he's kind of priced right beside, guys like Hamlin, Keselowski, Harvick, Larson, Chase Elliott. So I feel like he's going to go a bit overlooked. And I know, surprising as this is going to sound, I'm going to say I want to be overweight on Blaney in tournaments this week just because of how good he was at the 1.5s last year. And if that speed can carry over, I mean, starting 14th, he should contend for a top 3 finish and potentially win the race. So if we're looking at the 1.5 specifically last year, he averaged the most DraftKings points per race. He had the second best average finish, only behind Keselowski. One of the best running positions, or not one of the best, he actually had the best running position. The best driver rating, no wins to show for it, but 5 top 5s, 8 top 10s. Not the most laps led per race, but nearly to the top, and one of the best average fast laps, only behind Chase Elliott by 0.1. So Ryan Blaney, I do like him quite a bit. Not going to play him in cash games, but I do like him in tournaments. Then Kevin Harvick at $10,100. He is starting 4th, and I feel like he's severely underpriced here because, last season, if we could get Kevin Harvick at close in that $9,000 range, I mean, he would be so chalky. But the thing is, he has not been a popular play yet this year because at Daytona, he was starting near the front. People didn't really want to play him. And then the Daytona road course, he just really isn't that good at the road course. So he didn't have a ton of ownership those weeks. And I'm hoping just because of that, maybe his ownership goes a little bit lower than it should. But Kevin Harvick was amazing at the 1.5s last year in pretty much every single track. But I see no reason not to want to be overweight on Kevin Harvick here. I mean, the guy was phenomenal last year at these tracks, 63.9 DraftKings points per race, the best average finish, one of the best running positions, the best driver rating, 3 wins, 7 top 5s, 11 top 10s, the most laps led, and the second most fast laps. Kevin Harvick was an absolute animal last year, and I don't see why that's not going to continue. He's one of the strongest drivers in the field. I think he was the favorite to open up to win this race in Vegas. I think that's been bet to now Denny Hamlin. Kevin Harvick is now second, but I mean, would we be surprised if Kevin Harvick comes out, wins the race, and leads 100-plus laps? If he does that, he's going to be an absolute smash play on DraftKings. So I think you could also play him in cash games if you wanted to, just because he's that good. But definitely like Kevin Harvick in all formats here, starting 4th, and I feel like he is definitely underpriced. He should probably be up around Chase Elliott and Martin Truex, if we're being honest. So yeah, really like Kevin Harvick. Then dropping into this 9K range, we're going to start off with Brad Keselowski at $9,900. He is starting 7th. He's always a tough play because he's not typically in the optimal lineup, but he's one of the best drivers in the field. He typically has good races. He just really hasn't been much of a dominator sometimes, unless it's with the short flat tracks last year, definitely Keselowski. But at the 1.5s, he was one of the most consistent drivers. He just didn't really show up in the optimal lineup too much because he wasn't much of a dominator. Because if we're looking at the type form last year, he had one of the best average finishes, actually only behind Kevin Harvick at these tracks. Some of the best overall numbers. Did have a win, 4 top 5s, 10 top 10s, which is only behind Kevin Harvick. The glaring issue here is that he was not much of a dominator. As you can see, 12.8 laps led per race and 12.6 fast laps. Not saying he had a bad season by any means. It's just, if you want to get in the optimal lineup at his price point, you're typically going to have to dominate most races, which, I mean, he's capable of doing. Even if we look at the specific 1.5 mile tracks, he had the best average finish. He had a win, 3 top 5s, 9 top 10s, but the glaring issue, once again, he just wasn't much of a dominator. Only 8 laps led per race and 13 fast laps. That's not really enough to be in the optimal lineup at his price point unless he's starting way far back in the field, which is not what he's doing in this race. Now, in my Discord chat, we call him Sneaky Keselowski because, sometimes you just won't hear his name all race, and at the very end, hey, there's Keselowski, because I swear the guy is the luckiest guy in the world when it comes to pit strategy or getting a caution whenever he needs it. Like, whenever he needs a caution, I feel like it always works perfect for him. Then he starts the race, or starts the restart up front, whatever it is. So, Keselowski, don't like him, not a cash game target for me, but I said I don't like him. I do like him a little bit, but I don't like him a lot. But I'm going to have a little bit of exposure to him. It's not going to be anything overwhelming because I just don't think he's going to be a better player than guys like Kevin Harvick and Denny Hamlin that are priced right around him. But that should reflect on ownership. So if you want to get leverage on the field, you can go with Keselowski at lower ownership. But he's kind of a play for me here. I think he's going to be fine, but I'm not sure he's going to really get up front and dominate, which is what he's going to need to do at his price point. Then Denny Hamlin here at $9,600. He's starting on the pole once again, which he seems to do every single time they're at Homestead. I don't know why, but he's always on the pole. But he crushed last year. He won the race and absolutely dominated, and I was not happy about it because I didn't have much Denny Hamlin last year because on the pole, he didn't have any top 5s recently, so I didn't love Denny Hamlin. And starting on the pole, I felt like Joey Logano could get him on the jump, which he actually did. At the beginning of the race, Joey Logano passed Denny Hamlin, and Joey Logano had an issue on pit road, and Denny Hamlin just ended up absolutely dominating the race. If you guys want to look at the loop data from that race, I'll give you guys a freebie, because why not, because I'm feeling nice. So the Homestead 2020 loop data, Denny Hamlin won the race. He had an average running position of 1.8, led 137 laps, which is the most by any driver. Second most fast laps, only behind Tyler Reddick, as crazy as that sounds. And a driver rating close to 140. So yeah, Denny Hamlin was absolutely amazing last year. He was one of the best drivers at these track types last year. He was second average green flag speed at the high tire wear tracks. So yeah, I like Denny Hamlin a lot. I feel like he's underpriced. He's only $9,600. I feel like you can play him in cash games, and it makes me feel better that there's no competition caution because he could very easily lead the entire first stage. And if he does that, we're talking like 80 laps led, assuming he picks up most of those fast laps. As long as he doesn't like blow a tire at some point and finish outside the top 10, I think there's a decent shot Denny Hamlin makes the optimal lineup here. So yeah, definitely like Denny. If you guys want to see the numbers, I will show you, but the numbers speak for themselves. He was excellent last year. 3 wins, tied with Kevin Harvick for the most of these track types, 7 top 5s. Again, tied for Kevin Harvick. It was pretty much Kevin Harvick and Denny Hamlin at every single track last year. So yeah, I like Denny Hamlin quite a bit. One of the top plays on the slate in my opinion. And dropping down to Joey Logano. This is the same front row that we had last year. And keep in mind, Logano actually won the start of the race. He passed Denny Hamlin and led the first 25, 27 laps, something like that. Then he had an issue on pit road, so that killed his day. So if you're looking at his numbers last year and his finish, that's a bit skewed because I want to say it was Quinn Half he wrecked into. I can't remember exactly, but he had an issue on pit road, killed his day, and it sucked because I was way overweight on Joey Logano compared to Denny Hamlin, so that really sucked. But Logano is an interesting tournament pivot off of Hamlin because Hamlin's going to soak up a ton of ownership. He's the driver that people like to play more. He's on the pool. People love playing the driver on the pool. So people are all going to play Denny Hamlin now. If you want to get leverage in tournaments, Joey Logano, he's very good at Homestead. One of the best drivers at Homestead. He's got some really strong numbers. He's good at these track types. Looking at the numbers last year, not quite as good as Denny Hamlin, but he had some pretty solid numbers overall. He also had 2 wins and overall some pretty solid numbers. So I got nothing against Logano here. I feel like he's really cheap at 9,300. And if he happens to beat out Denny Hamlin at the beginning of the race and leads the first stage, you're going to be looking really good in tournaments because I can't imagine he's going to have much ownership whatsoever. And he's really cheap at $9,300. This is a really cheap Joey Logano. Probably going to be hard to find him at a cheaper price point all season long. So if you want to buy low on Logano, I don't hate doing that whatsoever. Now, I feel like some people are going to be asking me if you can play both these guys together. And you can because they're cheap. Just know the floor is pretty low because they're both starting in the front row. So if they lose spots, obviously it's definitely going to hurt them. But just because they're starting next to each other doesn't mean they both can't be dominators at some point in the race. Because if you're starting first and second, I mean, that doesn't mean only one of those guys can lead laps at some point. It's just a little bit harder to do. But I don't hate it in tournaments. Definitely wouldn't do that in cash games. But definitely like the price on Logano. If you want to go overweight in tournaments just to get leverage on the field from Denny Hamlin chalk, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. It's just a little bit riskier. And then after Logano, it's kind of it for the dominators because I really can't see anybody else dominating this race, maybe outside of an Alex Bowman at 8,300. But at that price tag, you're really not rostering him as a dominator, more of a finish position potential kind of guy. So That's kind of it for the big dogs. So we're going to get down to William Byron now. He's going to round out the $9,000 guys, and he's starting all the way back in 31st, which does make him a good place differential play. The floor is pretty nice, but I gotta be honest, I don't love William Byron here. I mean, the guy's obviously a good driver. He should contend for a top 15 finish, which is fine. It's just I prefer MDB and Tyler Reddick more at similar price points. They're also cheaper, so I'm not going to fade William Byron by any means, but I definitely want to be heavier on MDB and Reddick in my exposures. But I don't think William Byron's a full fade because I think that's going to reflect in ownership. And if you want to get leverage off of those guys, like if something happens to MDB or Reddick, which seems to happen often for some reason, William Byron's not a bad pivot there. Now, his numbers at these kind of tracks last year weren't that great. Only averaged 27 DraftKings points per race, average finish of 18.6, and a running position of 15, which is not better than any of these guys down below him. So that's the concern there. Only one top 5 finish and 4 top 10s, which isn't bad, but I think William Byron's a bit overpriced. And if I can get similar plays, or actually what I think is better plays at cheaper price points, I would rather play them. So not the worst play in the world, but not my favorite either. And then dropping down to this AK range, I like this AK range quite a bit because I love MDB and I like Tyler Reddick. I also like Alex Bowman quite a bit. Not a big fan of Kurt Busch, but he's definitely a tournament play. But starting with MDB, $8,800, starting 37th, he might be a bit pricey, but it's going to be really hard to pass him up. Now, if we're looking at the recent track history here, just specifically at Homestead, got to keep in mind he was driving a pretty bad car those days, so I'm not going to look at this whatsoever. I don't think it's relevant whatsoever. Now, the most recent race when he was in a good car, he did finish in 14th place. And if he finishes in 14th place starting 37th, we're looking at, close to 50 DraftKings points, which is excellent at $8,800. But yeah, there's really not much else to say about MDB. I mean, it's as simple as he's just a really good place differential play. As long as nothing happens to him during the race, he should contend for a top 15 like last year. His average finish was right inside the top 15, average running position right inside the top 15. So no reason to believe that would change. He's in good equipment now. So yeah, definitely like MDB. Now, Tyler Reddick, $8,500. He is starting 35th. He is going to probably be the highest owned driver on the slate if I had to guess. Now, it's only Friday afternoon, so obviously no ownership projections are out yet. So, but I'm going to guess that Tyler Reddick is going to be the highest owned driver in the slate. Like, how are you going to pass this up? The guy is kind of like Kyle Larson, where he's very good at riding near the wall. He was great here in the Xfinity Series, and that translated in his first Cup start as a rookie last year at Homestead. Like, the guy absolutely crushed. He started in 24th place last year. He finished 4th. He had 85 DraftKings points, had an average running position of 3.9. So it's not like he got lucky with a good finish at the end due to pit strategy. The guy was running up front the entire race. He had a legit shot of being a race-winning contender there. Had one of the best driver ratings, 115.5. Had 48 fast laps, which led all drivers. The only problem he had was he forgot it was the last lap at the end of the race. And they waved the white flag. He actually ended up slowing down and thanked all his crewmates for the awesome race. They were like, keep going, the race isn't over. So that was a little bit funny. So a bit of a rookie mistake there. But assuming that doesn't happen again, I mean, didn't really hurt Tyler Reddick whatsoever. But his numbers last year at these kind of tracks, I mean, they weren't amazing, but they were pretty solid. Running position at 15.4, finish at 15.2. I'm pretty sure he's a favorite in Vegas to finish inside the top 10 for this race, and I would be surprised if he doesn't. As long as he doesn't scrub the wall riding up there, I mean, he should have a very strong day, pick up some fast laps along the way, and he's an elite play in all formats. Pretty much a cash game lock for me. So yeah, love Tyler Reddick, and you're going to hear everyone else say that if you guys watch other people's content. I think everyone likes Tyler Reddick this week. I don't know why you wouldn't. Alex Bowman, $8,300. He is starting 13th. Now, his history at this track is not great. He finished 18th last year, but I'm more interested in their track type form. So last year at these track, Alex Bowman, he was one of the best drivers. Running position of 8.6, average finish of 13.2, driver rating over 100. Didn't have any wins, but 4 top 5s, a good chunk of laps led, and some of the most fast laps. So I think Alex Bowman, $8,300, starting 13th. I think he's a really sneaky tournament play because, everyone's going to play MDB and Tyler Reddick, and not everyone, but people are going to flock to William Byron starting in the 30s, and in the 7K range, you got Chastain and Briscoe starting in the 30s, so he's kind of sandwiched right in between a lot of good place differential plays. I also think Austin Dillon's going to carry a little bit of ownership as well due to how good he is at the 1.5, so Bowman, he should be underlooked here, and if he's under 10%, I want to be over that, because Bowman's got top 5 potential here. He's in the 48 car now, which I know doesn't change too much, but yeah, I like Bowman at the 1.5s, average running position inside the top 10. I know the average finish is down a little bit, but Bowman was one of those guys last year that would run well during the race and something would happen to him and ended up killing his race. But yeah, I like Bowman in tournaments. I think he's one of the better tournament plays on the slate because I can't imagine he's going to have much ownership whatsoever. And there's some sneaky top 5 upside there and maybe some fast laps and laps along the way if he gets a little bit lucky, restart position or something like that. So definitely like Bowman in tournaments. Then Kurt Busch, $8,100. He is starting 5th. Kurt Busch, Nothing against him, but I don't really want to play him, to be honest. Now, thank him for his amazing race during the road course. I know he forgot to turn at one point, went through the grass for a while, which sucked because he was in first place. And Kurt Busch was my driver that I was most overweight in the field compared to everybody else. So I was very upset when he wrecked because it was looking like an amazing day, but he ended up finishing inside the top 5. I forget exactly where he finished. I want to say 4th place, but had a very good race. So I do appreciate your efforts last week, Kurt Busch. He's very consistent at these track types. He's a top 10 machine, as you can see. 9 top 10s in 13 races last year. Very, very consistent. The problem is he's probably going to lose spots. Now, I feel like he can finish anywhere from like 6th to 10th place, but I would rather play Bowman starting at 13 because I feel like he can get a top 10 as well. So Kurt Busch, the upside is limited. If you happen to get up front somehow in lead laps, yeah, it'd be a very strong play, only $8,100. The problem is I just don't see that happening, and I feel like he's kind of a lock to lose a couple of spots. Now, he could stay within the top 5, which makes him an interesting tournament play, but I definitely think probably less than 5% exposure for me on Kurt Busch this weekend. Then dropping down to the 7K range, we have Eric Almirola starting 16th at $7,900, and he's one of those guys that I feel like is a decent tournament play because people are going to play those place differential guys. But Almirola is a guy that can easily contend for a top 10 finish. He finished 5th here last year. He finished 9th in 2018. Didn't have a good race in 2019, but I mean, I think he's fine. I mean, at these track types, Eric Almirola is not that bad. He had an average finish inside the top 15, running position of 15.2, which I know is not that far away from his 16th starting position, but I think Almirola's got sneaky upside here. If he happens to have a race like he did last year, he's definitely going to go overlooked, and if something happens to those place differential guys, I would not mind having some ownership on Eric Almirola. It's not a guy I'm going to go crazy on, but ownership nonetheless. Then Austin Dillon at $7,700. He's starting 22nd. If he's going to go overlooked by any means, I want to be overweight on Austin Dillon. He might be one of my favorite tournament plays of the weekend. He typically runs it very well here at Homestead specifically, but also really good at 1.5 mile tracks in general. So just looking at the numbers at Homestead, he's averaging close to 40.8 DraftKings points per race, an average finish just outside the top 10 at 10.5. One of the best running positions and driver ratings compared to guys that are in his price range. Obviously, it's not quite up to par with guys like Busch, Truex, and Reddick, but that's not why we're going to play Austin Dillon. We don't need dominator points out of him, but 2 top 10 finishes. He's finished inside the top 15 each and every single race here the past 6 races. He finished, looking at the specific finishes, 7th, 8th, and 11th. That's very strong numbers for a guy in the 7K range. Looking at these specific tracks last year, average finish of 12.7, how to win, 2 top 5s, 4 top 10s, and 8 top 15. So Austin Dillon, I think he's one of the best tournament plays on these slate if he happens to go overlooked. Now, I'm not sure if I'll talk his ownership up any because I'm going to probably beat the Austin Dillon drum this week, but I do like him quite a bit as of right now on Friday. And then if you want a deep tournament play, we have Christopher Bell here starting 3rd. Now, the price is nice, and I feel like he might be a bit underpriced compared to the equipment that he's in. The problem is starting 3rd, he's going to have to stay within the top 5 and maybe pick up some fast laps and laps led, but I think that's possible. He's coming off his first career win last week in the 20 car, which we know is definitely an upgrade from the 95 car that he was in. But the thing is, last year in the 95 car at this track, he finished 8th, and he was starting in the 30s. I forget exactly where he started. Now, we could do some quick math here. He had 28 place differential spots, and he finished 8th. I'm not even going to try. I want to say it's like 35, 34, something like that. But anyway, he started in the 30s, finished 8th in that trash can of a car, and now he's in the 20 car, and Eric Jones, he was pretty good at the 1.5s and the high tower 1.5 tracks, and the high tower tracks in general. So I actually have some high hopes here for Christopher Bell. I think he could stay inside the top 5, top 10 for the majority of this race. The problem is, I don't think it's going to be enough. And compared to the guys like Austin Dillon, Almirola, Chastain, Briscoe that are starting further back, I have a hard time seeing him be a better play than those guys. But if you want to throw like maybe a sprinkle of exposure on him, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. Now, in general, last year at these kind of tracks, numbers weren't that great for him. But I feel like it just makes no sense to even look into those because he's in a much better ride now in the 20 car and Joe Gibbs Racing. So a deep tournament play would be Christopher Bell, but I wouldn't have much exposure to him just because it's a very risky play starting in 3rd place. But if by some chance he happens to take the lead over Denny Hamlin and Joey Logano at the beginning of the race, I mean, you're going to be looking really, really good in tournaments if you got ownership on him because he's going to have some low ownership in my opinion. Then after Bell, we get some really nice place differential plays. I think it's some pretty decent price tags. Looking at Ross Chastain's numbers, looking at any of his numbers, I think is a big waste of time because he was an absolute junk equipment. I mean, average finish at 34th, a running position of 35.1. He is now in the 42 car, which is what Kyle Larson used to drive now. That does not mean he's going to drive like Kyle Larson. They definitely have some different driving styles. But Ross Chastain should compete for a top 20 finish here, which is good enough for me at $7,400 starting back in 30 seconds. So Ross Chastain, he's a fine place differential play. Same goes for Chase Briscoe at $7,200, although I think Chase Briscoe could maybe do a bit better than Ross Chastain. I know it's his first Cup start here at Homestead, but he's in good equipment. He's at Stewart Haas. He was fine here in the Xfinity Series, always behind Tyler Reddick for the most part. But yeah, I think Briscoe should contend for like a top 20, 15, which is fine at his price point starting threes. I think he's a very similar play to Chastain, and they're both starting around the same spot. So I like both those guys. I think both are cash viable, fine in tournaments as well, but definitely some nice cash game picks there starting in the 30s. Then Bubba Wallace, $7,000. He is starting 19th. I think we're going to be playing a bit of a guessing game here with Bubba Wallace because he's in new equipment, which we know it's definitely an upgrade from the 43 car last year. So looking at his numbers, we'd have to expect a bit of a bump up from previous seasons. So last year at the 1.5 mile tracks, running position at 23.8, average finish at 25.1, driver rating 58.5, the 1 top 10, 3 top 15s. Not absolutely horrendous, but definitely not the greatest either. I feel like Bubba Wallace should be a top 20 contender, top 15 upside. I don't think he's going to be a top 10 guy, but again, that remains to be seen. So it's going to be a bit of a guessing game here on Bubba Wallace. If you're fully bought in on the new ride, you can go for it. He did finish 13th here last year, which, looking at his recent track history, is much better than anything else he's ever done here. So, if you want to be ahead of the curve on Bubba Wallace, if you fully believe, I don't hate it, but to be honest, I'm going to be very hesitant on playing Bubba Wallace until we get some more data on there. If you're ahead of the curve and he does great, I'm happy for you, but I'm not sure if it's a risk I'm willing to take so far early in the season. And then speaking of a guy in a new ride, we have Eric Jones who's taking over the card that Bubba Wallace was in. If we just looked at those numbers, they weren't that impressive. Now, I typically like Eric Jones at the 1.5s. He's pretty good at the high tire tracks. Now, the problem is he's in the 43 car now, which, as we saw, was kind of like a 20th to 25th place car. Now, last year, they did finish 13th, so that's the kind of the gleaming light there for Eric Jones, and I think he's a better driver than Bubba Wallace, so I feel like he could be a bit better numbers than Bubba, what he put up in those previous seasons. So it's the problem is he's starting 18th, so I feel like it's kind of like where his cap is. Like if he has a top 15, I think it'd be an amazing day for Eric Jones, but I think for the most part he's gonna be stuck around where he starts. I think he could finish like 18th to 20th, but that car is not that great. And again, it's so early in the season, we have no idea how Eric Jones is actually going to be performing at the 1.5 mile track. So it's a bit of a guessing game because we don't have any practice data to look at. So if you don't want to take some unnecessary risks, I wouldn't really recommend playing Eric Jones too much. I feel like I might have a little bit of Eric Jones just because I'm kind of I know I'm the president of the Ryan Blaney fan club. I think I can be like vice president of the Eric Jones fan club. I'm not sure if anyone else out there likes Eric Jones more than I do, but I know last year I always told you guys to play Ryan Blaney, Eric Jones every single race. So maybe I'll play a little bit of Eric Jones, but nothing too crazy. Because if we look at the numbers, I think it would be a bit of a waste of time just because he was on a really good ride in the 20 car, and now he's in the 43 car, which just doesn't have that kind of speed. And I just looked at the time, and we're close to 40 minutes, and I'm still at Ricky Stenhouse, so I'm going to try to go a little bit quicker. I'm sorry, guys. I apologize for being so long, but I like talking NASCAR, so, things just get extended. But anyway, Ricky Stenhouse, $6,700. He's starting 15th. I feel like you can avoid him for the most part. He's actually halfway decent at steep tracks, but, his upside is just not very good. Looking at the track type form last year at these track types, 21.4 average finish, running position of 22.6. They'd have 2 top 5s, but there's maybe a little bit of upside. I'm not saying you should full fade Stenhouse, but not someone I would have more than 10% exposure on. Now, the problem is, down low, like I was saying, these guys all suck for the most part. They're all starting way too high. So maybe you're going to be forced to play a little bit of these guys. So Stenhouse, like 5% exposure, I think that's fine for him, but I wouldn't expect too much. Cole Custer, he's in good equipment. He's cheap. The problem is he is starting way too high. He finished 22nd here last year, which was fine because he was starting way in the back, but that is not the case this time. I feel like he's an almost lock just to lose spots. Looking at the tracks last year, he only had 1 top 10 finish in 13 races, and he's starting 10th. So I don't think there's any real upside here for Cole Custer. Ryan Newman at $6,400. He's starting 23rd. It's going to look good compared to these other guys, but Newman didn't have a good year last year. Looking at the track type form, average finish of 19.2, running position of 19.7. Did have 6 top 15s and 8 top 20s. So I guess Ryan Newman is a halfway decent play compared to the other guys down here. I wouldn't expect too much. Ryan Newman's kind of like a lock to be in a 15th, 20th place range, which is it's not bad, but it's not a lot of upside. But relative to these other guys, I think he's obviously a much better play than guys like Custer, Busher, McDowell, Ryan Preece running so far up. So I don't hate Ryan Newman. I'm probably going to have to play some of him just from necessity because of, the other guys where they're starting. But he did have a 7th place finish back in 2019. So if you want a bright spot, there you go. He also finished 15th in 2018, but I don't have high hopes for Newman, but he might be a play you just have to play due to his starting position compared to everybody else. And his history at Homestead's really not that bad. 2 top 10s, 3 top 15s, and 4 top 20s. So I don't hate it down low. I really don't. It's not pretty, but it's not terrible either. And I know like Chris Buescher the past 2 weeks, but now he's starting all the way up in 12th. I can't justify playing Chris Buescher. He has an outside chance of maybe holding a spot or losing a few spots, but I think the chances of him finishing in the top 15 are very unlikely. So I can't really recommend Chris Buescher to you. Michael McDowell starting 6th. I think that's a really strong fade candidate. There's no way he's going to finish inside the top 10 in this race, although I will say he does have a top 10 finish here at Homestead. Looking at the recent track history, he does have a top 10 there, but it's not something you should expect, so I don't really think you should play Michael McDowell. Ryan Preece, I think he's an awful play starting 8th. I mean, looking at the recent track history, he's an average finish of 29th and a running position of 28.7. I think he's a near lock to lose close to 15 to 20 spots, so I do not like Ryan Preece. Daniel Suarez, $5,700. He's starting 21st. You might have to play him in a few lineups just because there's no good plays down low. Like, these guys all suck so bad. I don't want to play any of these guys, but we're going to have to. If you want to play guys like Kyle Busch, Denny Hamlin, Chase Elliott, you're going to have to dig into this range, unfortunately, but it's a bad week for some really good expensive guys because we're going to have to pair them with cheap guys, and there's no good cheap guys. That's the problem. But I think that 99 car is going to be a bit better than 96 car. Now, the past 2 races, it's kind of hard to judge because it was at a super speedway and a road course where equipment doesn't really matter too much. I know Suarez had some decent races there, but you can't compare that to an intermediate track like this. So I think he's going to be better with Trackhouse Racing. The 99 car is not bad. He has a good sponsor this week. It's just, do we really think he's going to get a top 20? Probably not. I think he could contend for a top 25, which might not be the worst thing down low. So maybe a little bit of Suarez exposure, but wouldn't expect too much. Anthony Alfredo, the rookie, $5,500, starting 27th. Unfortunately, I feel like he might be the chalkier guy down here. I don't think he's going to be like super high on like high down on Daniel Suarez last week, but people are probably going to flock to him. He's in the 38 car. John Hunter Nemechek was not that bad at the high tire wear tracks last year, or at least similar tracks, so we might flock to Anthony Alfredo. Front Row Motorsports is definitely not the worst team in the road. Michael McDowell, I mean, these guys had a decent year last year, so if Alfredo can compete for a top 25, I mean, that's fine at his price point. The problem is he's a rookie making his first Cup start here. His numbers in the Xfinity Series weren't all that amazing either in the couple of starts that he had, so the expectations are low, but his price is low, so it kind of matches that. And I think he can finish above 27th. I think he can, so I don't hate Anthony Alfredo, but it's definitely not pretty. And then also Corey LaJoie, I do think he's viable down here. You actually might be more popular than Anthony Alfredo. I'm not sure, but he's starting 2 spots further up, so I'm not sure exactly how people are going to interpret that. But I don't mind Corey LaJoie. He's in a new ride this year, which I feel like is going to be a bit better than his old ride. He's in the 7 car for Spire, but I know a lot of you are probably thinking, ooh, Spire Motorsports. But it's actually going to be a bit better this year. They're actually getting some help from Hendrick and CGR, so maybe he can contend for a top 25, which again, I know is not a lot starting 25th, but at $5,400, I feel like he could at least hold his own. The track type form last year, he's had an average finish of inside the top 25, running position of 25.8. I don't hate it. I feel like his car's going to be maybe a little bit better, so if he could compete for like a top 23, that's not that bad, only $5,400, especially with the lack of value plays we have. So don't hate Corey LaJoie. Justin Haley, no thanks, starting 20th. Quinn Howell, $5,100, starting all the way back in 38th. That is the dead last spot, so he literally cannot lose you spots. As ugly as it sounds, I don't hate Quinn Howell here. Last year at these types of tracks, he had an average running position of 33.6 and an average finish of 32nd. I know those numbers are awful driver rating of 34.4, but if he could gain 5 spots here, 5 or 6 spots, that is not bad at $5,100, and he cannot lose spots. Like a guy like Alfredo and LaJoie, they can lose you spots. Quinn Howell, I mean, his floor is like, what, 4 or 5 some points, something like that. So I don't hate Quinn Houp. As awful as that sounds, I think he is somewhat playable. Same goes for Josh Bilicki, but I do prefer Houp over Bilicki, but he kind of had similar numbers last year. He's just starting 2 spots further up. Then after that, I would not play any of these guys. I would not play Davison, Ware, Hill, McLeod, Smithley. Maybe McLeod because he's 34th, but that's pretty much it. I think anything below Houp or Bilicki, I really think you should probably restart your lineup at that point. Yeah, with that being said, guys, I think that's going to be it for the video. It was a long one, so if you made it all the way through, please let me know in the comments down below. I think we're like at 45, 50 minutes, so I do appreciate everyone that hung with me the entire way. And if you found the video helpful in any way possible, make sure you leave a like down below. I really do appreciate that. Leave your comments down below if you have any questions. If you want the DraftKings contest, make sure you leave a comment with your DK username down below as well. And I'll send you an invite as soon as I make the contest, and I'll get this chronological order. The first 90-some people that enter, or that comment their username, will be in the contest as long as you guys accept. Also, if you haven't already, my social media handles in the bottom right corner of your screen. You can follow me on Twitter at ChrisPennell16 and CPenn16 over on IG. And And if you want access to my exclusive Patreon content, link is down below for that for $10 a month. I'll put something on the screen right now so you know exactly what you get with it, but there's a lot of good stuff on there. Hop into the Discord chat as well. And don't forget, if you want to try out Monkey Knife Fight, use the information that I just told you guys and use it to your advantage for Monkey Knife Fight. If you use code RACE50, you get free money bonus up to $50 instantly. So again, that is promo code RACE50, and use the link down below for that. So I appreciate you guys watching. Hope it was helpful, and I'll see you at the live stream 11 a.m. on Sunday. And I'll see you guys in the next video as well.